Mr. Chairperson, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues and friends, dear children. 30 years ago, the Convention on the Rights of the Child reframed how we understand children's agency and their power. Children went from being passive recipients of services and charity to individual rights holders with a voice. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is one of the most comprehensive human rights instruments. It includes children's economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights. It is equally applicable in peacetime as in armed conflict. This holistic approach is also supported by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals. The agenda has a distinct target on ending violence against children by 2030, but the issue also cuts across many of the other goals. In fact, the SDG is a crucial tool to realize the rights in the CRC, and the SDGs cannot be achieved if the rights in the CRC are not fulfilled. 30 years after the adoption of the CRC and almost 5 years after the adoption of the SDGs, we can see some progress on preventing and eliminating violence against children. This includes stronger legal and policy frameworks, more and better quality data and solid evidence on what works to end violence. You also see a greater coherence and coordination amongst different stakeholders working for the well-being of children, growing partnerships and coalition, including with the most important allies of all, children themselves. We should celebrate the progress achieved since the CRC was adopted. However, we also note that the progress is slow, too slow for us to be able to keep our promise to the world's children to live free from violence by 2030. Still, half the world's children suffer some forms of violence every year. There are also disturbing trends and increasing challenges that threaten the gains we have made. These include climate change, long-term conflicts, humanitarian disaster, increasing numbers of children on the move, new technologies, and the spread of terrorism and violent extremism, as well as remaining harmful social norms, increasing poverty, social disparities, exclusion, and discrimination. The cost of violence is huge for the individual child and also for the society at large. Damaged childhoods translate into damaged families, communities, societies, and nations. The financial cost of violence against children to national economies is immense. Some have estimated it to $7 trillion per year. As we celebrate the Convention's 30th anniversary this year, we must argue with force and with passion for the values that it represents and the system it is part of. Most importantly, we must create opportunities for children to exercise their own power, to be part of the decisions that affect their lives, and to be real agents of change. Ladies and gentlemen, dear children, there is an urgent need to mobilize global leadership for children and the right to live life free from violence in peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. We must galvanize action on the global, regional, and first and foremost at the national and local levels to prevent and respond to all forms of violence in all settings. And we must ensure that the most vulnerable children are not left behind. We need to ensure a focus on children as a distinct group as defined by the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I welcome the growing attention to the voices of youth, but at the same time, I want to emphasize that the unique perspective of children cannot be replaced. We need to keep a focus on the whole life cycle of children and young people. We need more effective cooperation among the many actors in this field. Children's lives are not divided thematically to correspond to the mandates of the organization working on their behalf. Children are often exposed to more than one form of violence and in more than one setting. It calls also for adequate financing and investment in children, prioritizing those in situations of greatest vulnerability and marginalization, and reliable disaggregated data to reflect the situation of all children, particularly those who are too often uncounted, yet also at greatest risk of being left behind. This also calls for wide participation throughout the development, implementation, and follow-up and review processes of policies responses at the national level. This needs to be accompanied by effective measures to ensure accountability. It requires a meaningful participation of children, empowering, listening to children's voice, and treating children as active participants with full rights will be crucial if we are to make real progress in creating a world for children that is free from violence. In conclusion, I would like to recall that the last SDG summit resulted in adoption of the political declaration in which world leaders called for a decade for action to deliver the SDGs by 2030. Effective implementation of the Agenda 2030 is also crucial for the realization of the whole range of the rights in the CRC. There is no better time to demonstrate visionary political leadership, and we need to act better and faster. We need to act better and faster for children, but with children, not only on behalf of those who are children today, but for the 1 billion individuals who will be born between now and 2030, the children who will inherit a post-SDG world. Many thanks.